Hello, Carrillo Studio. I've made this video lesson to help you understand that I couldn't always do that. Even into my 40s, I couldn't do what I just did. And I want to consolidate in one video lesson basically the things that I've been doing over the past 8 years or so that has allowed me to expand my range, expand my endurance, and make the trumpet a whole lot easier and fun. Most of you know by now that I have an approach that I like to call the pyramid approach. And that mental image, that diagram basically has transformed the way I think about the physical approach to the instrument. I want you all to understand that this is not a method unto itself. This is more of a system that you can apply to any trumpet method already in existence, whether you warm up with the stamp method or the Caruso or Schlossberg or any of that. This is something that you can develop alongside any other trumpet methodology. But these are things that I did not know as a student nor as a young professional. And I wish I would have known back then. It would have made my whole life a lot easier and my musical life a lot more fun and less terrifying. So, what is the pyramid approach? The pyramid approach is basically when we think of the range of the trumpet, I envision a pyramid. Now, I don't envision my sound sounding like a pyramid. In that case, I want this, right? I want like a big, nice monolith. I want it nice and even going up and down. But in terms of what my air is actually doing and my physical approach to the instrument, I I use the pyramid as a very useful guide. So let's think about this. How would this work? How does this apply? Well, the base of the pyramid is the widest part. That's our lower register. That's where we are at our most open in terms of our mouth. Our tongues tend to be down. Our mouths tend to be more open. We allow more air. In fact, the low register is where you will actually use the most amount of air on the trumpet. So if you have long extended passages in the low register, you're going to need to tank up in order to make sure you don't run out of air. These notes are also less likely to project in a large ensemble setting. Trumpet playing a high C at the forte level is one thing, but if I'm having to play a low C on a lower part, and to match that volume, I'm going to have to play way louder than that in order to do that. We move to the middle register, and this is actually the easiest register to play on the instrument. Why do I say that? Well, we think about the last time you got really, really tired. You can actually still get these notes to speak and to pop out. It's the high notes that are a struggle, and also the extreme low notes. As soon as we get into the extreme registers on either side, those get very difficult when we're getting fatigued. But those middle notes, we definitely can play them. Notice that all of the great trumpet methodologies, the Chikowitz long tone study, the stamp method, the Caruso method, Schlossberg, they all begin not in the low register. They begin in the middle register. And they warm up that area first, and then they usually will get into the low register and expand, and then finally they'll add the upper register as well. So there's a reason for that. Since these are the easiest notes, if we want the trumpet to be easy, we want to try and approach all registers in the same manner that we approach the middle register, okay? So that's what I want you to know about that middle section of the pyramid, your middle register. The upper register, this is the smallest point of the pyramid, and for good reason. A lot of things change. Things change in our mouth in this register. Our tongue level is much higher in general in this register. We're using different syllables to play up there. It's no longer ah and eh. It's more of the e position. What does that do? Think about it. It makes our oral cavity smaller. There's still room for air to pass through, but our oral cavity has now shrunk in size. So how can we possibly put the same amount of air we would on a low C, for example, on a high C? The good news is we don't need to. The trumpet is designed, the mouthpiece is designed so that as you increase the velocity of the air, you are going to get a higher pitch frequency. Now, much is made about, okay, but what about the sound changing upstairs? I really do believe that what I'm teaching you, as far as this approach, uh, applies regardless of equipment, regardless of if you're playing in a more commercial environment or whether you're playing in a classical environment or jazz or any of the above. You also should be able to access all notes of your range, low and high, on any mouthpiece, basically. We have to remember that the trumpet itself and the mouthpiece, that's the machine. That's the tool that we use. But we are the instruments. We are the instruments that we must master. We must learn to teach and train our body to make that tool do what we want it to do. So that means that what I'm teaching you in this pyramid approach is going to apply to any instrument, any model of trumpet. If you're playing C trumpet, if you're playing E flat, if you're playing piccolo trumpet, different levels, certainly you'll have to make different adjustments for each of those, but this pyramid approach stays the same. The upper tip of the pyramid represents your upper register. This is obviously perhaps the most challenging register to develop, not perhaps. Um, it also is the register that requires the least amount of air. That's right. And this can be very confusing because when we hear great trumpet players who command the upper register very well, it certainly does not sound or have the appearance that they're using very little air. Why is that? Well, that's just the nature of our instrument. Our instrument is one of incredible energy and power in the upper register. There is no other instrument out there that can command the upper register with such incredible energy as the trumpet. It's the reason that the trumpet or the bugle or some version of it was used in battle. This was the most powerful type of mouth instrument that you could make and warn your troops of an oncoming army or something. But don't allow that to change your perspective of the actual physical attributes of what it takes to play in your upper register. As I said before, your tongue comes up, which makes your oral cavity much smaller and speeds up the air, and also means that requires us to use less air up high, right? Also, our aperture size varies. We're going to talk about that a little bit. It's not the exact same aperture as a low note or your lowest notes. These notes project exceptionally well, even at a softer dynamic level. Whenever you hear a great orchestra holding a chord, you're always going to hear the glockenspiel, you're always going to hear the piccolo. Why? Because they have the highest pitch frequency. That frequency is going to be able to project. So that's the pyramid approach in a nutshell. Very simple. You know, you envision a pyramid and we're dividing our total range, which in reality is just one range of the trumpet, but we are kind of dividing it into three general areas: our lower register, middle register, and upper register, so that we can actually identify what's happening from a physical perspective through the diagram of this pyramid. But that doesn't really tell us how to implement it or show us how to do it, or are we doing it correctly. And that's why I'm making this video, because I want to walk you through some practical steps that you can ensure that you're learning this properly. And if you do this and what I'm asking you to do, the end result should be two primary things. You're going to sound better in all registers, and the trumpet is going to feel easier. In fact, I want those to be your two guiding principles. Those two principles are going to be your best teacher, to be honest with you, as it comes to the physical approach to trumpet playing. Whenever you experiment with something, you want to make sure that, number one, it sounds fantastic. Number two, it feels pretty easy to do it. And you'll know it feels easy if you can repeat it over and over again. So before I lead you right to the exercises, I want you to know that there are three general areas of your body that we utilize for effective trumpet playing. Now, there are more than that, but these are the areas that I actually want you to think about. The other areas, we can kind of let those go. They have a job. They normally do it. For example, your lungs, they fill up with air, right? Yeah, we don't really need to think about that. We just need to take in air. We don't need to think about our lungs. But there are three areas of your body that I actually do want you to pay attention to, and I actually do want you to focus on. And those three are, let's build from the bottom up. Number one, your lower body breath support. Now, most people think that is simply the diaphragm, or they'll use the word diaphragm. The diaphragm is an involuntary muscle. You have no control over it. When you sneeze, for example, or cough, it automatically contracts. But you can't move your diaphragm up and down. That's not how this goes. A better way of thinking about your lower body breath support are your abdominal muscles surrounding your belly, your belly button, but also around the back, your intercostals, the muscles of your lower back, and including your buttocks. And we'll get to that in a moment. I'm using all of these areas at some point when I play the trumpet. And I will say this, even though when you're playing soft middle register type of music, you don't necessarily need to use a ton of your lower body breath support. There is a measure that should always be engaged. That's very important. Now, how do you know if you're not using your lower body breath support properly? Well, if you're somebody who struggles mightily with endurance, more than likely you are more of an upper body trumpet player. What do I mean by that? I mean that you breathe kind of up high here. It's kind of a shallow type of breath. And also, as a result, we have tension in our upper chest area, shoulders, neck tension, and of course, the throat as well. And what I want you to know is that all of those areas of your body are actually responding to what your lower body is not doing. That's right. If your lower body was doing its job, even in the middle register, okay, then the upper body is free to remain relaxed. The chest can remain open, shoulders down, neck tall, throat has nothing to do with trumpet playing. Leave that thing alone. Here is a simple exercise I want each of you to practice to make sure that we're using and making a connection, I should say, with our lower body breath support and the air. There has to be a connection there, okay? So the way I do it is kind of a modified version of what Maynard Ferguson calls the yoga breath. of what Bobby Shue calls the wedge breath. Roger Ingram is also a big proponent. He's actually played with Maynard, essentially studied under him. He also studied under Bobby Shue. So it's like two sides of the same coin. Um, the general gist of it is that when they take in air, they fill up the base of the lungs first, as if you're pouring water into a cup. Okay? But as they're filling up with air, the belly button is coming inwards towards the spine. And that's why Bobby Shue calls it a wedge. It creates this wedge. Wedge to me sounds a little aggressive. I prefer to think of it as my breath support is now ready to be engaged at any moment. So I want you to take this style of breath. We're going to just fill up slowly. But as you fill up, you're going to feel your belly button coming in. I want you to place your hands on your belly button, and you're going to notice your chest is going to come up and out, and that's very good. So let's try this. One more time. Now, I want you to try this now. You're going to take this type of yoga breath, wedge breath, whatever you want to call it, and you're going to create your embouchure, and you're going to only let out a very small airstream, but you're going to really feel that you're going to increase the speed of that airstream from the muscles around your belly button. So it's going to be like this. You can really hear that air rushing through. Now, the key is you got to be pretty active down here around the belly button area, and you must remain relaxed in your chest. In fact, when your chest comes up, as you release the air, do not allow your chest to collapse back down again. Don't do that. Keep it up, keep it open, like a proud soldier. Let's try the breath again. Here we go. 3, 4. Very good. So this is a simple exercise that Bobby Shue actually recommends you do this 60 times a day away from the horn. Why is that? Because this should be essentially your default type of breath. Now, we're going to change the amount of air we take in based on what we're performing. If it's a really, really long phrase, or if we're playing a very loud shout section, or if we're playing a very loud part of a Bruckner symphony, then you're going to have to adjust and take in more air. If you're playing a very delicate passage, or if you're playing a ballad and you want it to be nice and soft, it doesn't make a lot of sense to take in so much air that you're not really going to be using all that air up. And then the carbon dioxide begins to build up, and that's going to start actually increasing tension in your body because of all the air that's unused. A couple of more things about the lower body breath support as it pertains to standing while playing. In fact, let me stand up right now. It's very important that in order to access your lower body breath support, that your knees are not locked and you're just standing as if you're on stilts. No, your knees must be unlocked, almost like you're ready to jump, or kind of like you're getting ready, especially if you've got some aggressive playing to do in the upper register or loud playing. Your lower body's feeling limber, almost like you're about to lift something a little bit heavy, right? So this is the only way you're actually going to be able to access your lower body breath support. while standing. So it's a very important distinction I didn't want to forget to mention. And what I need you to know is that the higher I play, the more and more I must do in my lower body. And again, I'm utilizing my entire lower body, including my lower back and my buttocks, especially with notes above high C. The last thing I want to say about your lower body breath support is that it is the bodyguard of your lips. When we're playing, and especially when we're playing more physical styles of playing, that horn wants to come in on your face, right? Imagine that horn coming in on your face. If you are not counteracting that with an aggressive use of your lower body, sending a very fast stream of air that way, not necessarily blowing down the house. Trombone players and tuba players have to use a lot more air. Their mouthpieces are easily more than twice as big as our mouthpieces. I mean, look at the hole in the mouthpiece. How much room is there in there to put air anyway? Not very much, right? But it's what our lower body element is doing to the air that we are using, right? But to continue with my point, the horn wants to come in on your face. Your lower body is going to help develop this sense of equilibrium so that you have this energy of the airstream going that way at a very fast velocity. And that will allow your lips to continue to be relaxed enough to vibrate, even though they're stuck between two hard surfaces, the mouthpiece and your teeth. Okay? Without that, without this lower body element counteracting it, that horn's just going to bear in on your face, and it's going to lead to, premature endurance issues. Next, we're going to move to our mouth area, and there are two parts of the mouth that make up the next two parts of your body that I want to focus on. So this next one I consider to be the most important development for me in developing my approach to the upper register, and in general, just my approach to shifting registers on the trumpet. And that is the use of the tongue position, or tongue position flexibility is another way of saying it. You know it as tongue level, tongue arch, or using syllables to change the tongue position. So say with me, ah. That's the general tongue position for your low register, ah. Now we say, different people use different syllables. I use the syllable eh. Ah, eh. Everybody say eh. Eh is the general area of your middle register. Okay, so the notes essentially, like in the staff, would be more in this eh position. Notice that the tongue has come up in order to say eh, which is making your oral cavity area a little smaller. And now the upper register is more of the E position. And what I want you to notice about what your tongue does and should be doing in the upper register is that your tongue is essentially moving forward and the back of the tongue is coming up. The front of the tongue should remain down and out of the way. This is very important. Sometimes and teaching about the tongue can be quite difficult because we don't have x-ray vision to see if our students are doing this properly, for example. That reminds me, there's an incredible MRI from Sarah Willis, the great horn player from the Berlin Philharmonic. If you just Google or check out on YouTube, Sarah Willis MRI, great video where she was able to play the horn in various registers, and it's revealing how much she's relying on her tongue to shift registers. Now, when we say E, It's a very high position for the tongue. Now, there's very little room at that point for air, but there's still room, right? But it's just far less than when we were in the ah position. Ah, eh, e. The front of the tongue stays down. That's where our sound is still going to remain warm and round even as we go high. But that back of the tongue comes forward and up. Ah, e, like that. Okay. Um, this is the most important step I could teach you, to be honest with you. And why is that? Because if your tongue is not getting to a high enough position in the upper register, then you'll only ever be able to play high notes one way, and that's just blasting. It's going to be very difficult for you to be able to play at a softer dynamic level. And now listen to me and listen to me carefully. The way you master the upper register on the trumpet is to have the ability to play at a controlled, softer dynamic in the upper register. In order to play that exercise, I was thinking about the pyramid, meaning I'm going to fill up as I begin the lower part of the instrument. My tongue is changing syllables in the middle of that exercise. By the top, I'm in a different syllable altogether than E, by the way. I'm more saying something like shh, 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 where the back of my tongue is almost plastered to the roof of my mouth, save for a small opening for a very small airstream to whiz right through. Okay? Um, sorry. But what this means is I'm using I'm using a tiny airstream by the time I'm in the upper register. And then when I come back down, my tongue is slowly lowering, right? And so I'm actually able to fill up more with air as I get back into my middle register and certainly into the low register. If you are not sure that you're using the tongue properly, this little visual aid might help you. This comes from Adam Rappa. He has a wonderful video on making high notes easier. And he talks about the use of the tongue. And he just kind of does this. Let's see. And he just. I think it's interesting that this little exercise, he starts in the upper register. I'm a big proponent of playing scales backwards, which means practice 2-octave scales, but practice starting on the upper octave note and coming back down. And then challenge yourself to get back to that exact same setting that you began with. And you can start this wherever your range is right now. Let me demonstrate a couple. And once again, you will know when you're doing this correctly when every note sounds great. And number two, it feels relatively easy to do. Now, we've talked about two areas so far, the tongue and the lower body breath support area. And the key with both of these, and the third one that I'm about to talk about, is that all of these must be actually working together. Wayne Bergeron was here last semester as part of a Zoom clinic, and I asked him the question how he built his range over the years. And he told me, he corrected me actually, and I thought it was beautiful. He said, I don't really look at it as building your range, because that sounds like muscle work. It was more like discovering your range. What I'm talking about here is coordinating all of these physical processes, the use of your tongue while simultaneously using your lower body breath support. And the coordination involved is where you will discover your range. Before I move on from the tongue into the third area of your body, I need to say this. You heard me talk about the front of the tongue staying down and out of the way. Well, that doesn't quite stay all the way up to the extreme upper register. In fact, what helped me to really break through some personal barriers of mine between high F sharp and double G, for example, and then to eventually be able to access notes above double G all the way up to double C, is that the front of my tongue, once I get around high D, I'm not exactly sure where it happens, but the front of my tongue actually comes out from the back of my bottom teeth and extends forward, touching my bottom lip like that. I call this rolling out the red carpet. And what this does is it streamlines your already small airstream that you were using to get up to high C's and high D's, and it makes it even smaller and even faster. And it just turbocharges the velocity of air. So you're using very little air. I do not recommend rolling out the red carpet on notes below high D or high C maybe, because it's going to have a negative effect on the roundness of tone in the middle register. So don't be lazy, right? But I'm just sharing with you that the notes above high C and high D, that's exactly what's happening in my playing. And you can experiment with this by, if you've ever struggled with articulating in the upper register, like coming in and popping off high notes, this is a great way for you to practice this technique. So the back of my tongue is elevated. The front of my tongue is literally pushed up against my bottom lip. It's like the front of my tongue is leading the airstream directly to my aperture. That's the way I would describe it. And so practice soft little pops or even repeated articulated notes in the upper register. You know, start with notes that are somewhat comfortable for you. Maybe it's B flat or A or high C, and then start challenging yourself to go higher, but control your dynamic. Think mezzo. I can't tell you how difficult that used to be for me until I learned, number one, how little air that requires to perform. And then number two, the proper use of my tongue position. I have to start out and I have to remain in the tongue position for a high C, and then for a high D, and then for a high E, and then for a high F. Yes, there is a tongue position for each of those notes and for every other note on your instrument. But the beautiful thing about really focusing in on your tongue position flexibility is that it frees up your lips to just vibrate. You don't have to overthink or overwork or over manipulate your lips to achieve the different registers. Ah, e, ah, ah. That's what my tongue was doing in order for me to shift registers like that and look close to the same, where I'm not moving my trumpet up and down or my head moving up and down. No, my tongue is doing that work for me inside my mouth. Lastly, the third area that you are to concentrate on, and this is the one where I feel we got to handle with kid gloves, and that is the aperture itself and the aperture size. And I feel I have to mention it even though I don't want to. Where does my trepidation come from? Well, the reality is, if you want to be able to play your lowest notes, even pedal notes, and then go all the way up to double G, double A, even double C eventually, your lips have to do one thing, and that is they have to buzz, they have to vibrate. No buzz, no tone. A weak, tense buzz, you're going to get a weak and tense tone. A robust vibration of the lips gives you a robust tone in all registers. And as you can see, when we get into the extreme upper register, that's the top of the pyramid. There's not a lot of room there. All of a sudden, we're extremely focused right here, and we still have to make sure that the meat of the lip that's inside of the mouthpiece is free enough and relaxed enough to buzz. Otherwise, we get nothing. But we do have to talk about the aperture size because it does not remain the same. And I used to fight this a lot because I was afraid that if I made my aperture smaller, I would get a smaller tone. And it just simply is untrue. This is how your mouthpiece and your trumpet are designed to be played, specifically the mouthpiece. So what do I want to say about the aperture? Well, remember what I said about the middle register being the easiest register, and how we really want our warm-up routine to start there and kind of grow this way. And all of the great methods in the trumpet world do that, the ones that have stood the test of time. Likewise, our aperture size does change between registers, whether we go from middle to low or middle to the upper register, but perhaps not as much as you think, and not as much as some of you might be struggling with now. I think for many young students who may have difficulty developing their range and endurance, oftentimes they lead with manipulating the lips first and maybe aren't even thinking about the tongue position and certainly not their breath support. I lead with the tongue first. I move that first. And then I add breath support as needed. And only third do I want to mess with this. So the movements from a large aperture to a smaller aperture are not that great. Let's first talk about how to get into the low register properly. And what do I mean by properly? I mean efficiently. You see, the low register is quite forgiving. We can actually play low notes on the trumpet in a lot of different ways, most of which are not helpful, especially if we want to be able to start high and come down in the middle and then go low and then come back up the way an improvising musician wants to play, or the way a difficult passage, a 2-octave passage that you might have to do in a classical piece, for example, would have you play. The mistake so many students make is that as they go from the middle register into the low register, yes, your tongue is coming down from to e. I'm sorry, from to aw. Aw. Your jaw, you've probably heard band directors all the time, drop your jaw to play low, okay? And I used to cringe when I would hear that, but then I examined my own playing and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I do kind of drop my jaw, especially when I really have to get down low. But here's the key. Remember, your lips have to vibrate. And what the mistake a lot of students make is when they drop their jaw and drop their tongue position, they also open up way too much here. In fact, their whole embouchure tends to collapse. Now their lips are very far apart. Okay. I don't talk a lot about embouchure. In fact, when students come to me saying they think they need an embouchure change, I I'm the person that's always like, if we can avoid that, that's great. Let's focus on these other things and let's see if we can get your setup to respond my way, right? So, but I will say this. There's a very simple formula that you can use and you can certainly hand off to your students, especially if they're beginners. They'll be able to easily remember this. And it's just called the 3 F's for embouchure development. Firm corners, flat chin, fast air. Very simple. Firm corners, flat chin, fast air. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is because when we go from middle to low, in order to retain a nice vibration of the lips, our lips must remain close together somewhat. So even though our tongue syllable is going from to ah, the jaw's opening, our lips and our corners and our chin all we must retain the 3 F's, basically. So it's going to look something like this. And this is the most efficient way to get a nice full sound in your low register, but not to go too low or too open, because then it becomes very difficult to get back up in passages. Great way to practice this, or just to do sirens from the middle register into the low register, just on your mouthpiece alone. And there should be no lack of buzz throughout that whole bend. You really got to hear that even, slow bend all the way down and back up. It shouldn't like cut out briefly. Okay, because if it cuts out, that means your lips stopped vibrating. We're going to do these same sirens as we go into the upper register. Now, what happens with the aperture in the upper register? Well, this is where it definitely gets a little smaller, but it's too easy to start cramming our lips together. And what's going to happen to the vibration at that point? So it gets as small as it can get, as focused as it can get, while still maintaining a vibration of the lips. When I'm playing this exercise of just, slurring from a low C up to just a high C, for example. I'm literally doing this. And did you notice how little air I was using on the highest note there? Because when you lift your tongue, hello, and when you make your aperture smaller, there's not a lot of room for air. A side note about the use of your air in the upper register. This might sound radical to you. I no longer blow air in the upper register. Say what? That's right. I blow air in the middle register, and I certainly blow a lot of air in the low register, but I don't blow air in the upper register anymore. So what do I do instead? I sigh. Do me a favor. I want you to sigh with me. Take in a nice relaxed breath, and then I want you to just let the air come out of you. Do it again. Now, do it again, but create your high note embouchure with an elevated tongue position and with a smaller aperture. And I want you to let the air out. Don't blow the air out. You see, I'm not struggling. I'm not struggling to cram this massive amount of air through a very small aperture and a very elevated tongue position. There's not this like inner struggle between what's happening down here in my lower body, trying to move that air out and then trying to pinch here. No, that struggle doesn't exist because I'm sighing in the upper register. And when I sigh in the upper register, I get this sound. Right? Kind of crazy, huh? All right. What else do I want to say about the aperture? Ah, yes. The way I like to think, I don't like to think about specifically shrinking my aperture. The way I like to perceive of this is my jaw and my teeth. You can think either your teeth position or your jaw position. It's literally going to get smaller, which means my lower jaw is going to come up since your upper teeth can't really move anymore. Only your lower jaw can come up, right? So it's literally going to do that. And that in itself, me thinking about that makes the appropriate adjustment I found with my aperture size. Okay. So when I'm playing in the low register, my teeth are this far apart. Middle register, upper register. So my teeth, I'm not like grinding them together by any stretch of the imagination, but they are definitely closer together, right? And that helps to get my aperture in the proper position for whatever note I need to either come in on or get up to, what have you. So now you're going to want to practice those sirens and apply them from the middle or low register into the upper register. And we're going to kind of put all of this material together. Remember that on the mouthpiece itself, it's really, if you're doing the pyramid approach properly, it's going to sound like you're really moving a lot more air in the low register, but the higher you go, it's going to become a very, very soft but buzz, vibrating type of sound. Okay. You still should be able to get up high, even to like high C and things like that on the mouthpiece alone, but don't try to make it sound as loud as the others. Understand and commit to doing the pyramid approach, which is you're going to be using much less air and much more elevated tongue position and greater breath support to speed up the air. You can even hear, hopefully, it's coming across in the audio, how much louder the middle C sounds to the high C. Okay. But I guarantee you, if you do it like that on the trumpet, it's not going to sound like that. Along with this video lesson about the pyramid approach, I created a PDF. It was actually from a slideshow that I'm preparing, but I made it into a PDF and I decided to go ahead and share it with you. These are other general tips. Honestly, the reason I put this together is I was trying to show how ridiculous this process has been for me and how many little tips and tricks and things I've had to think about have made an impact in where I am today in terms of how I command the range of the trumpet. And I've got 14 tips, and it's not even near the amount that I think I've been thinking about over these past few years. So, but these are things that have made the biggest difference. Some of them are going to be repeated. There might be a couple of things there that I did not mention in this video. I don't mean this as something that should, intimidate you as you look at, oh my goodness, I got to do all these things. No. I'm hopeful that there's some things you're already doing. And if there's some things there that you've never tried before, well, maybe try them and see what happens. I'm not offended if you try something that I give you and you find that it just doesn't really resonate or work for you. That's totally fine. Then go and continue. What I will ask you is keep searching, though. Keep searching for something, because there are a lot of different methodologies out there. There are a lot of different ways of saying roughly the same thing. And sometimes you hear someone use an analogy or someone creates an exercise that really, really makes a difference for you. So I highly recommend you do that. But I will say, if you're going to try what I give you, make sure you try it for a minimum of 2 weeks. But take that PDF and see if there's something in there that you that maybe you haven't heard or haven't dealt with before. And if you have any questions about that stuff, please send them to me, email me, hit me up. The last exercise I'm going to leave you with puts all of these processes together. And I call it Tito's left-handed range exercise. Somebody help me with the title. I need something. I'm going to ask you to do something that most professors will not do. I'm going to ask you to sit back, lay back even in your chair. Get your body as relaxed as humanly possible. Just don't drop your trumpet, please. Nice and relaxed. Laying back. Now this exercise is designed for you to focus on the 3 general areas of how we, develop or discover our range: your lower body breath support, your tongue position, and your aperture size, or you can say jaw movement or what have you. Those 3 areas, okay? While keeping the rest of your body as relaxed as possible. And I just want to reiterate this point. There is no such thing as 100% relaxation when it comes to trumpet playing. If there was, it would sound like this. Have a listen. Right? When I'm playing That's a lot of energy coming out of the trumpet. But it's not coming from the trumpet, it's coming from me, right? That energy has to come from someplace on my body, and it has to come from someplace in your body. Now, the question is, where is it going to come from? Is it going to come from your left arm pressing into your face? Or is it going to come from your lower body going that way, shooting the air? You see? So, Tito's left-handed range exercise goes like this. You lay back. You're going to, in a very relaxed way, bring the trumpet to your lips. And from this position, you're going to, in the beginning, I want you to start on middle G. Eventually, I want you to start on middle C. But for right now, middle G. And we're just going to go up the partials. Every single partial, even the kind of false partial, the B flat partial and everything, just totally open. And we're going to focus on number one, playing softly. Because remember, we're not going to ever get control of our upper register if we cannot command it at a softer dynamic level. Number two, you're going to focus on your tongue position. And as you get way up there, your lower body breath support is going to continue to increase. Those are the points of energy that are required from your body. There is some energy required from your face, but that's simply to keep the position of your lips from opening up too much, because it's a very fast speed of the airstream happening, and it's easy to kind of blow that seal, right? So we need to create a seal with our corners. Keep your chin flat. There is some effort involved in your face, but I really think oftentimes that's super overblown. If the other parts of your body are doing what they're supposed to be doing, you should be able to be okay here. Okay. So it's going to go like this. I'm doing it soft. I'm taking, as far as the rest of my body, very relaxed, shoulders down, neck tall, chest remains open. And I'm focusing in on the areas that need to move. I will tell you, as I got higher and higher, first I went up to a high C, then I went up to like a high E, I believe, and then I went up, the last one, I went up to a double G. For those notes to pop out up high in this relaxed state, my lower core and especially my gluteus does not remain relaxed. That is where the energy comes from. That's what speeds up the air. So, not sure if you noticed, but I was literally like kind of raising in my chair because of how much I was relying on that part of my body. Do you normally do that? Is that a common practice with you? Perhaps you've never made this physical connection between your instrument and the use of your body to generate the energy that's required on the instrument. I hope this video will help you to do that. I wanted to get this up for you so that you can access this whenever you want. And I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions about it. And I will see you all in 2 weeks. Make sure Wednesday you have off, right? No school classes that day. And I highly, highly recommend, if it's possible for you, to take that entire day off. Plan your schedule accordingly so that you can decompress, relax, watch Netflix, eat some good food, that type of thing. If you can't take the entire day off, then take as much of the day off as you can, right? So we need that. Without a spring break coming up, it's going to be very challenging as the semester wears on for each of us. Okay. All right, everybody. Talk to you soon. Peace.